right? You could get it so that they can. You could do it so that you add a band and you reduce the amount of load the individual is having to overcome, and as a result, they might be able to get a muscle up because of the fact they're working against lighter loads, so they can pull more explosively. They can get more speed into the pull and therefore get themselves up over the bar. Or you could teach them how to kip, in which case they're reducing the amount of load, increasing the amount of speed on the pull, and increasing their ability to get over the bar.
Yep.
Two ways of doing the same thing: increasing speed output, and as a result, improving. Recording now. Can you hear me? Oh yeah.
It's so weird. It feels like you're getting further away as well. Like I can sort of hear you when you're over here, and then it's like, oh, hello.
It's like the Bohr effect, you know, like yeah, exactly. Yeah. You sound just like a race car. It's beautiful.
It's a great thing to have on film. Me doing that as well.
Yeah, I'm pleased that I didn't actually do it. I was very, very close, and I was like, no, maybe I'll try and be normal.
I have no shame.
Good.
No
Shame is for the weak.
Yeah. What is the difference between a piano, a tuner, and a pot of glue?
I do not know.
You can tune a piano, but you can't piano a tuner.
Where's the pot of glue in there?
I need to get stuck on that.
Oh, God.
It worked.
That is beautiful. Well played. Well played. All right, cool. Hello, everybody. I am Zab of Multiply Performance.
And I'm Matt of Faulkner Performance.
And together this is the Performance Proposition.
Yes, it is.
So today's topic, we are going to talk about kipping pull-ups, or kipping just generally. Some of you will have seen people criticising kipping pull-ups. People from the world of calisthenics hate pull-ups that are done with kipping. People that do kipping pull-ups because of the fact they say it's not strict form. And we're just going to talk a little bit about why that's the case and whether it's always the case. So what are your thoughts, man?
So obviously kipping was sort of born out of a very specific style of training, i.e. CrossFit. That's where you see a lot of kipping pull-ups, kipping muscle-ups, kipping handstand push-ups. And a lot of it came out initially of, we want you to do 100 pull-ups, and people were like, I can't do 100 pull-ups, so how am I going to find a way to do 100 pull-ups? So it was sort of a solution to the problem that they were faced with in that thing. Like, how do I get to 100 pull-ups if I can't do 100 strict pull-ups? Okay, they haven't put any movement standards on what constitutes a pull-up beyond.
You've got to get your head over the bar, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, in my mind, people say, oh, why not just do 100 strict pull-ups? And it's like, well, they've just found an innovative solution to a performance problem that they've been set.
So the issue that the calisthenics community have with it, or the issue that people tend to have with kipping pull-ups, is the idea that you've just taken an exercise that was relatively hard and you've made it easy, because you have reduced the amount of work that your primary muscle groups in that movement pattern stereotypically have to produce. So normally when you do a pull-up, you're doing a pull-up so that you can strengthen your back and your biceps. But by doing a kipping pull-up, you reduce the amount of load that your back and biceps are having to overcome because you generate momentum. And as a result, your back and biceps don't get as strong as they would have done had you exposed yourself to the full load.
Which is true.
But, as you said, it is a useful tool for CrossFitters and people in the CrossFit community to use if they want to move more efficiently and perform those high reps. And also, you don't necessarily always want to increase maximum strength. Sometimes it is about improving the speed at which you can perform a movement or the power with which you can perform a movement. So if we take another crossover, if we look at the world of Olympic lifting, some people would say that doing a push press is cheating because you're not lifting the full load with your shoulders as you would on a strict press.
Yeah.
But the goal isn't to exert as much force as possible with your shoulders. It's to move as much weight as possible from the shoulders to an overhead position and build stiffness in that overhead position as explosively as you can.
Yeah, and in the push press, it's slightly different. It's very slightly different because, you know, it's about syncing up the legs with the arms and generating the power from the legs. And like you say, then over, like getting used to pushing that at speed and locking it out firmly overhead. So like you say, it's
But some
just
would say that you could use a kipping pull-up in the same way, right? So if you're not doing kipping pull-ups for the sake of trying to do ridiculously high reps, but instead you're trying to focus on increasing your speed of movement, then using that kip, you're using your full body to generate momentum. You're using your lower body, you're using your core to generate some momentum so that you can then accelerate that with your arms rather than having to initiate the movement with your arms and overcome all of that inertia with just your upper body.
Yeah.
So in the same way, you're developing core strength, you're developing other movement patterns and learning how to transfer force through a chain.
Yeah. Well, what was really interesting is that I said to you before that I mentioned to Jack and Jack is a guy at the gym who does calisthenics. He's very strong. He's very capable at calisthenics.
Absolute beast at the moment.
Absolute beast at the moment. Really, really strong. And I said, we're going to do it on kipping pull-ups. And his initial reaction was, they're shit. And he gave me permission to shout him out and say that Jack said that they're shit.
Yeah.
And I challenged him and I said, well, do you reckon that you could do, you can do X amount of strict push-ups. Do you reckon you could do 100 kipping pull-ups? And he was like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, because it's a different stimulus. Like you say, there's more stress on the tendons. There's different muscles working. There's a different cord. It's a skill. It's not the same as a pull-up in that a pull-up you just focus on your lats, your biceps, your back, working as hard as they possibly can to get you from A to B while maintaining stiffness in your core. A kipping pull-up is about pushing your hips through and back and syncing that with your biceps and your lats all coming in at different points of time and like getting that circular momentum. Because I've tried to do it before. It's fucking hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from a skill perspective, it's difficult, but it just provides a different stimulus, right? It's like it is like the difference between doing strict press and doing push press. It is it's as a result of the fact I'm able to move more quickly. It's just overspeed training.
Yeah.
If I were to try to improve my power output on a particular exercise, I can increase my strength or I can increase my speed. In order to increase my speed, I'd reduce the load.
Yeah.
To move faster, or I would add a band pulling me in the direction in order to help me get more oomph. I'll be able to move my body more explosively. Yeah. And learning how to do that neurologically will also add benefit to my power output at heavier resistances. 100%. So if the goal is if you're struggling to generate power in a pull-up, like some people are really strong on pull-ups and can't do a muscle up, right? You could get it so that they can. You could do it so that you add a band and you reduce the amount of load the individual is having to overcome, and as a result, they might be able to get a muscle up because of the fact they're working against lighter loads, so they can pull more explosively. They can get more speed into the pull and therefore get themselves up over the bar. Or you could teach them how to kip, in which case they're reducing the amount of load, increasing the amount of speed on the pull, and increasing their ability to get over the bar. Yep. Two ways of doing the same thing: increasing speed output and as a result improving power output on a pull. Yeah. So,
and I mean, so like I've got a client at the moment, like who I've had for a really long time, and one of his goals has been to get consistent bar muscle ups, right? Yeah. And when we first started, like one of the only ways for him to get up there was to A, use a band, but B, even with the band, add a little bit of a kip, get through, like overcome that concentric effort. Yeah. And then we're like, okay, cool, but we'll do that. And then on the way down, we'll stay nice and tight. So you can even combine them. You can combine the kip with some strict stuff. Yeah. If your goal is to get better at strict, a kip is it's almost like a nice little entry point, like a band, like even doing it from the floor and stuff like that. It's just an entry point to get you in there. And then beyond that, you have proper kipping muscle ups, which again, ridiculously skillful, ridiculously difficult to do well.
Doing it high volume, the amount of work. Like at the end of the day, we're looking at the amount of work that an individual is doing. If in a minute you can do 10 strict pull-ups, or in a minute you can do 50 kipping pull-ups, one is going to require more force output. The other one is going to require more speed output. The only thing that you can decide is which of those two things is going to lead to a better result for you. But the 50 kipping pull-ups is probably going to put a bigger amount of load on your body overall than the 10 strict pull-ups. It's not going to be as good for strength. Yeah. But it is going to have a positive impact on performance.
Yeah.
the other thing that we kind of mentioned was the whole idea, the comparison between like the kipping pull-up and cheat reps or assisted reps, right? And the idea that like some people, when they're doing a standard strength exercise like a bicep curl, will cheat to get the weight up to their shoulders. But that doesn't necessarily take away from the eccentric phase of the lift, right? Because you can do a cheat concentric phase, or you can have someone assist you on the concentric phase of the lift where you're lifting the weight up to the shoulders and then lower the weight down with control, slowly performing that eccentric phase. And as a result, the amount of tension that is created within your muscles is going to be greater than they would have been able to produce naturally against like in a concentric phase, right? Everyone knows that not everyone knows, but the eccentric phase is where you are at your strongest.
Yeah. I think it's something like
1.4-ish. Somewhere between kind of 1.2 and 2, but like typically average is around about 1.4.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this ties like really nicely as well back into the episode we did with the bicep curls, and they're talking about assistant stuff, and you know, the classic bodybuilding mantra of like everything has to be controlled, everything has to be tense and moving. Yeah. Like there can be no limiting factors. And so like, I mean, I used to get the piss taken out of me in like one of the gyms I worked in by the people who bodybuild, because they were like, oh, Matt with his fucking, 2 second, 1 second eccentrics, like you're never going to build any muscle like that. Yeah. And it's like actually doing a shitload of volume and getting that extra volume from like you start off strict and then you start getting into that like rep 8 of 12 and you just add like just a little bit, and you keep getting that, and the value of getting that out versus like stopping there because you can't be strict anymore. Like, I'm still adding volume.
I find it interesting because it's the people that can't see the difference between that or can't see the similarity between that and doing a drop set. Because at the end of the day, it's the same thing. Like you're just trying to eke out a little bit more work in every single set, and by eking out that little bit of work, creating a slightly bigger stimulus, whether that's increased muscle damage, whether that's increased metabolic stress, whatever it is that's contributing to greater levels of hypertrophy development, even though you're losing out slightly on mechanical tension on those additional reps. That's the key thing. It's additional reps. There's no reason not to do them, seeing as they are going to provide some additional value.
Yeah, and work is work, mate. Yeah, like that's what we seem to forget all the time is work is work. I mean, I think one of the most mind-blowing things that I'll always come back to, and I probably said it 100 times anyway, is there was like a big meta-analysis that came out a couple of years ago that said basically it doesn't actually matter how you break up your sets and your reps. All that matters is the total amount of work achieved.
I can remember that one. That was the one that was basically saying 60% of it was the one that said that 60% of all improvements in hypertrophy or all improvements in strength basically could be attributed to volume. Yeah. Right? So it's the whole idea of it doesn't matter how many sets you do or how many reps, so long as you do the same amount of work, like you can split that over 20 sets in a session, or you could split it over 20 sets in a week. Yeah. Like, so long as over time you are doing the same amount of work, you're going to get the same outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And even pretty like much across a day, like you could do 5 sets of 10, like in one session, or do 1 set of 10, then an hour later do another set of 10, then an hour later do another set of 10, and you would get pretty comparable results. And so it's literally just how much work are you doing? And I think, like you say, leaving some of that volume on the table because you're afraid of like cheating some reps or what that will do. And you have to be careful, because there is an extent to which when you start cheating reps, when it starts to get heavy, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position because you're fatigued and you're getting something up that you don't necessarily know whether or not you can control it down. And so there is a higher risk as that kind of goes on, but as long as you're not stupid with it, you're all right.
So that links in relatively well to what we were saying just before this, which is that the kipping pull-up, like it's great in terms of improving reducing the amount of force you need to get yourself up. But because you're moving at such speeds, the amount of force that you're having to deal with and contend with when you get to the bottom of the rep and you're really trying to decelerate all of that weight going in that direction is quite high. So it's similar to like plyometrics in that you don't want to try and like go straight into jumping for maximum height every single rep, or doing depth jumps or doing rebound jumps, etc. Because if your body's not prepared for that, if you haven't prepared your connective tissue for that level of load or that level of strain, then you're at an increased risk of injury. And the same is true when it comes to kipping pull-ups. So in an ideal world, you do want to build up your ability to do strict pull-ups before you're getting into a position where you're doing high repetition kipping pull-ups. Yeah. because otherwise there is going to be a weak link in that chain, and that weak link in that chain will eventually get worn out.
Yeah.
So
one thing, just a final thing to touch on, because I think we talked about cheat reps and training and all that sorts of stuff. The final little thing that I think this topic kind of leans into is like 1 rep max stuff, right? Because I used to be one of those where I was like, you know, if it doesn't look the same as your warm-up sets, it doesn't count, because like that's the movement standard you've placed upon yourself, whatever. And as I've progressed through my career, as you like, I've come more towards an idea of when you get to that 1RM thing, like kipping in training is actually quite valuable, because it teaches you like how your form is going to look when you break down, or it gives you exposure to that. So when you get to those 1RMs, it just becomes about, like in a squat, get down, get back up. In a pull-up, hang, get your chin up off the bar. Yeah. In a bench press, get the bar to your chest and get it up. You know, people lose their shit over, you know, bouncing off the chest when you bench, or bouncing out the bottom of a squat, or, you know, doing a bit of a, you know, latty whip when you're coming out of a, you know, getting into a chin up and stuff. Like, what's your thoughts on?
So I think we potentially have a slight difference of opinion on it.
Okay.
Because it sounds like you're like, okay, like it's fine to cheat a little bit, and I think it depends on what you're trying to test.
Yep.
Right. So if you're trying to test your maximum force capacity with a select group of muscles, and you're cheating in a way that means you're taking the emphasis off of those muscle groups, then that could actually end up with you like, yeah, okay, you end up with a bigger total, you end up with a bigger score on that day. But then when you're programming with a slightly with a score that's off the mark, because like realistically, if the goal is to test your squat 1 rep max and your ability to produce force with your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, etc. on a squat, but then you're using a load of tendon recoil because of the fact you're bouncing out of the bottom position, then when it comes to you programming your strength block, you're not going to be using that tendon recoil to get yourself out of the squat, because of the fact you're going to be using pause reps and other strategies, and you're going to probably control the eccentric phase a little bit more. And because you're not trying to get the maximum score, you're just trying to train in a way that's effective for maximum strength, you're going to struggle to lift the weights that you might have like projected for yourself off the back of that cheat rep. But then it's about reflecting how you're going to train. Like if you are an Olympic lifter, chances are you're going to bounce out of the squat quite a bit in training, because that's how you're going to do it when it comes to competition as well, right? You're learning how to be explosive. You're learning how to use the whole system. You're learning how to use the muscular tendinous unit in its entirety. So if you aren't bouncing out the bottom position in a squat, you're giving yourself an unnecessary handicap, because when it comes to your training, again, you're going to be using that tendon recoil. So actually, in that scenario, you probably do want to be bouncing. Yeah. Similarly with bench press, if when you train you bounce, then you may as well test with bounce, because that's going to give you, that's going to reflect.
It reflects what the work that you've done up to that point.
It reflects the work you've done up to that point, and reflects the way that you're going to train moving forward as well. Yeah.
But it's like if you're a powerlifter, you know, you have to pause, you have to stop. You don't have to necessarily pause, but you have to stop. You can't bounce. And I don't know if it's the same for squats, but yeah, basically I think it all comes down to what is the movement challenge or the performance challenge that has been set, and what is the optimum way to approach that performance challenge. Because if you're training to squat and the squats is going to be assessed on a pause in the bottom, bouncing is stupid. In your training, you may as well train the weights that you're going to be able to pause with. In the same way, if your challenge is 100 strict pull-ups, training kipping doesn't make sense. And I think that's what this all comes down to, right? Is it kind of is a bit of lost in translation between different training modalities, where the Cali guys are going, we do everything strict, why not just do strict? And it's like, because we don't care about strict, we just care about set volume. And
we're looking at how many reps we can do in a given amount of time. We're looking at training that quality, because that's how we're going to break down our circuits in our mind. When we get a challenge that requires us to do 300 pull-ups, it's like, okay, right, I'm going to do this in blocks of 50, and I'm going to have such and such amount of rest between. You need to know what your capacity is, what your work capacity is, in the most effective way and efficient way of performing that movement within the confines of the competition. So I agree. Going back to just very quickly, just kind of touching on why the elastic recoil thing probably isn't the thing that we want to be using when we're testing 1 rep max for strength. It's that whole thing of like, actually, when it comes to strength, what we're trying to figure out is what we're trying to build. We are looking to improve our tendon stiffness, but the primary thing we're trying to learn how to do is recruit as much muscle mass as possible and produce as much force with our muscle mass as possible. Mm-hmm. So if we are bouncing in and out of a rep, the chances are we're not producing as much force with those muscle fibers as we possibly can, because of the fact we are overcoming the initial inertia of the bar with tendon recoil.
Yeah.
And that's then generating momentum, and then maintaining momentum is a lot easier than creating momentum.
Yep.
So if we want to build maximum strength, it's actually potentially better to pause, which is why powerlifters will typically pause at the bottom of the rep, and why they're tested in a way that requires them to pause at the bottom of the reps. So yeah, so that's thoughts on that.
Really, isn't it? Yeah.
That's thoughts on on kipping.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, just to conclude, so kipping pull-ups, good or bad?
Indifferent. Useful when you need to use them.
Useful when you need to use them. I think that's the key, right? That's basically what we're trying to get at here. Is it's a solution to a novel performance problem, not the right or wrong way to do things.
Yeah, it's a way to train if you want to train that quality.
Yeah,
like if you want to kip because of the fact you want to improve your power output or you want to improve your speed output, great. If you want to kip because of the fact you want to improve your strength output, that's foolish, because actually the way to improve your strength output is strict reps.
Yeah. But if you just want to kip because you really, really want to hit a certain weight on a chin up, and that's the way to get it, then kip.
Yeah.
You know,
if you want to kip because of the fact you want to look elegant, then do it that way as well.
Exactly.
It looks awesome.
It does look awesome, especially the muscle ups. Like I've looked at that before and gone, I just don't think my body would be able to figure that out like quickly. It would take a long time.
Yeah.
But either way, we're waffling.
So yeah, kipping, cool. Use it if you want to use it. Be aware of the increased tension that it's going to create, or the increased amount of pressure it's going to put on your connective tissue.
Yeah.
If you haven't trained up to that point and you haven't built that quality, and therefore be a bit mindful of that, and maybe prepare yourself by doing some strict reps or by doing some kind of hypertrophy work beforehand.
Yeah. Or in a similar way to plyometrics, limit the amount of reps that you're doing per session.
Limit the amount of reps.
And like you say, understand that you're stressing tendons, and tendons take slightly longer to recover. So you probably want 48 hours between training sessions as opposed to training them 24, you know. But yeah, it's cool.
Awesome.
So that's kipping pull-ups.
Cool.
Lovely.
Awesome. Good. Right. Enjoy the rest of your day, team. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.